Hello everybody and welcome to this presentation video, which is based around theme 2's 2.4, which is called national income. What you can see on your screen now is the relevant part of the specification that this topic is based around. So a bit like with the last video, what would be really useful to do is if you can at the end of the video go back through this part of the specification and think, hang on, do I now understand the information that I've now been reading through and been listening to? So let's move on anyway then. So what I would like you to do, please, in your independent learning book, if you can copy down question 1, so 1A, 1B, 1C and 1D. Spend a little bit of time putting down your answers. So if you can click pause now, write down your answers, and once you've put down your answers, hit play, and you can compare what you've written against what I think the answer should be. Right, everyone. So national income then, first of all, let's think about what national income is. All this does, it measures the total value of all the goods and services produced within the economy. So national income is in effect a measurement of the GDP of the economy. It's worth noting, though, just the distinction between income and wealth. So income is a flow of earnings that people receive. So for most of this will be money that we earn from going to work, so wages from selling our labour, but also people will generate rental income from renting out properties, which can be earnings. This could also be dividends on shares that people might own, or it could be profits that people generate from owning businesses. Wealth, on the other hand, is the value of assets that people own. So this would be things such as property, it would be shares, it could be businesses, it could be savings in the bank. Now, the idea is, everyone, this wealth will then generate income for people in the future. So logic would be the more wealth you've got, the more ability to earn an income you will be able to generate from that at some point in the future. Okay, now what we're going to be moving on to in a moment or two is how we measure the national income or the GDP of the economy. Now, what we're going to be sort of focusing on is this formula: income equals output equals expenditure. These are 3 different ways that we can measure the overall national income of the economy. Now, we can think about income, output and expenditure by looking at the circular flow of income, output and expenditure. Now, it's worth noting this is a very simplified model of the economy. Now, all it does, it shows the interdependence between households and firms, who are 2 key economic agents in the economy. So what we're doing here, we are ignoring at the moment some other things that happen in the economy. So we're ignoring the role of governments, we're ignoring the roles of importing and exporting, international trade. We're also ignoring the impact of investment, but also savings by households. So it's what we call a closed, very simplified model of the economy. So think about what this diagram shows. It shows the interdependence between households and firms. So if we were to look at it, what we would assume is that households will supply factors of production to businesses. Now, the most obvious one would be labour, but also we supply capital, land and enterprise to businesses as well. In exchange for supplying our factors of production, we will generate an income, what we call factor incomes. So this is the flow of earnings that will then go into households across our economy. This model then assumes that what people then do, they spend this money back on the output produced by businesses. So expenditure measures the spending by households on the output produced by businesses. Now, clearly, we're going to give that money to businesses back in exchange for the goods and services those businesses produce. So incomes, output and expenditure in this model should all give us a rough idea of what the national income of the economy actually is. Okay, now here you go then again, income, output and expenditure. Now, when our government publishes GDP performance or national income performance, it will average out these 3 different approaches. So incomes, output and expenditure we'd expect to be roughly the same. So work out what the 3 individual ones are. We take an average of the 3, and this will give us a rough indication of the GDP of our economy. Right, now what we can now do, we can open up the circular flow diagram to make it a bit more realistic. So what we're going to be thinking about then are the injections and the leakages, or also known as the withdrawals from the economy. Now, the injections, which are government spending, investment and exports, are the things that when they go into the economy will expand the size of the circular flow and therefore make GDP increase. Now let's think about why. If there's more government spending, this could mean that households are receiving more benefits from the government. So this could be more pensions, more unemployment benefits, more working tax credits, more family allowances. Now what this will do, it will allow households to spend more money in the economy. And if people are spending more, it means firms have to demand more factors of production to produce more goods and services. So more government spending would lead to the circular flow expanding. Investment is spending by firms on capital goods. So if firms were to expand, build a bigger factory, buy more machinery, etc., then they will need more factors of production from households. This, of course, would then increase incomes, which would allow us to spend more money, which means firms have to produce more output across the economy. Now, another one is exports. If there's more demand from abroad for our businesses' output of goods and services, it means that to produce more goods and services, our firms have to demand more factors of production. And again, that could be workers, which would lead to more incomes, which can allow for even more spending to take place, which means that more output would have to be produced. So overall, everyone, if there are more injections taking place, then we are injecting more money into the economy, which would lead to actual economic growth, which means that the national income is increasing. Of course, if injections were to fall, then it means that actual output in the economy will start to fall as well. The withdrawals are savings, taxes and imports. Now, if the withdrawals were to increase, this time the circular flow would get smaller, which would mean that national income would also fall. Obviously, if withdrawals were to fall, it would mean that the circular flow would get bigger, and that would lead to more national income across the economy. Now let's think why. What we know is in the circular flow, if people supply their factors of production to businesses, they will receive an income in exchange for this. If taxes were to increase, it could mean that people are paying more income tax. This would lead to households receiving less disposable income, which would reduce expenditure, which means that the output produced by firms would also fall. Now, another way of thinking about it is savings. When people receive their incomes, if they then choose to save a certain proportion of that money, it means their spending will be less than what their income is. And that would mean if they're spending less, firms again have to produce fewer goods and services. Now, imports. What the circular flow assumes is based on this simple model, is that when people receive their incomes, they will spend it back on the output produced by our goods and services. If, however, more of us devote a bigger proportion of our income towards foreign goods and services, it means that the spending on UK businesses will fall, which means UK firms will again produce less output. And that will mean that less of us are demanded for work, which means incomes will also fall. So overall, everyone, it's really, really important that you understand that when injections increase, the circular flow and national income will grow. If withdrawals increase, then the circular flow will get smaller, which means that national income will also start to fall. Right, next question, everyone. What I would now like you to do is to draw for me some diagrams. So again, copy down these questions in your independent learning book, hit pause, write down your answers. And once you've got down your answers, hit play and we'll compare what you've done against what I think the answers should be. Right, everyone. Now, if we were thinking then about a growth in national output in a Keynesian world, we can show it in two different ways. The first diagram, so the one in the bottom left, shows actual economic growth. So if we get an outward shift in aggregate demand, it means that households are demanding more output from the economy. Well, that therefore means that firms have to respond by producing more goods and services. So national income would grow from Y1 to Y2. As a reminder, everyone, AD will move outwards when there's a growth in consumption, more investment, more government spending, more exports, and or fewer imports taking place. So that would lead to an expansion in the circular flow and means that national income has increased. Now, in the second-hand diagram, you can see that the LRES moved outwards. This would lead to, again, a growth in national income from Y1 to Y2. Now remember, LRES moving outwards is caused by potential economic growth. This is about an improvement or an increase in our country's factors of production. Now, as LRES moves outwards, what we would assume is that better productivity would drive down price levels across the economy, and that would allow more people to demand more output, which would lead to a growth in national income. Okay, so you've got a movement outwards in AD in the short run. In the long run, you've got LRES moving outwards, which means potential economic growth would allow for a further growth in national income. Right, now we're now looking at a classical world. Now I've given you here 4 different diagrams. The ones I want to focus on in this video are the top 2. So if we look in a classical world, again, an outward shift in aggregate demand would lead to an increase in national income. So if that was driven by higher consumption, more investment, more government spending, more exports and or fewer imports, outward shift in AD would lead to a growth in national income. This would, however, create demand pull inflation. Now, in the top right-hand corner diagram, you can see a growth in national income driven by an outward shift in short-run aggregate supply. This is driven by a reduction in business costs. As business costs fall, it means that price levels need to fall to clear markets. So output would grow from Y1 to Y2. If we thought about a classical world in the long run, then national income will increase because of potential economic growth. So again, what we know is that when LRES moves outwards, it's driven by an improvement or an increase in factors of production. The logic would be as LRES moves outwards, this would also reduce business costs, which would allow SRES to move outwards from SRES1 to SRES2, which means again in the long run the economy will clear at YFO2. So again, you've got the benefits of potential economic growth there. You've here got macroeconomic equilibrium in the long run. Now, in the left-hand diagram, you've got a classical world, and the assumption would be that the economy in the long run will always clear on the LRES curve. So in other words, we will always get to the YFO. So that means potential output will always be achieved in the long run in a classical world. So national income will be at YFO. Now, in a Keynesian world, this isn't guaranteed. YFO is possible, which is the extreme vertical part of the Keynesian LRES, but due to sticky wages and prices, long-run output could be stuck below the YFO. So any national income is possible in the long run in a Keynesian world. Right, next question, everyone. What I would now like to do again is to copy down 3A, 3B, 3C, put down your answers, hit pause, obviously now. Once you've put down your answers, hit play and compare what you've done against my answers. Right, okay, so let's think then about what the multiplier effect actually is. All it is when an original increase in expenditure triggers off other increases in output. Now, what this will mean is then that when you have a multiplier effect, the economy will grow by more than the original injection into the economy. So what this means then is if we were to inject £1 billion into the economy, a multiplier effect might mean that output actually grows by £2 billion. Okay, so it's where economies will grow their national income by more than the original injection. Now you've got here, everyone, some really, really important key terms. What will affect the size of the multiplier will ultimately come down to the marginal propensity to withdraw. So what we're looking at here is the proportion of additional income which goes towards withdrawals. So what this means then is that the multiplier effect will be bigger if we don't import much, we don't get taxed much, and we don't save much money. So if savings, taxes and imports are very low, it would lead to a much bigger multiplier effect. If imports, taxes and savings are very high, then the multiplier effect will be very, very small. Right, now we can look at that with formulas. So to work out the size of the multiplier effect, we have 2 different ways of doing it. We can calculate it by 1 divided by the marginal propensity to withdraw, or by 1 divided by 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. Now you've got an example here. What we're looking at here is a world where people devote, when they receive an additional income, 15% towards imports, 25% towards savings, and 20% towards taxes. Now this therefore means at the moment then, for every £1 additional income that people receive, 60% of it will go on the withdrawals. So the biggest withdrawal is the savings, then the taxes, and then the imports. If we therefore use the formula 1 divided by MPW, we'll get 1 divided by 0.6, which is 1.67. Now what that means then is that for every £1 extra that people get, the economy will grow by £1.67. So the idea is people will be constantly reinvesting 40% of their additional income back into the economy. Look what happens there if we were to increase the marginal propensity to withdraw to 0.8. The multiplier would now be 1 divided by 0.8, which gives a multiplier effect of 1.25. So for every £1 that goes back into the economy now, the economy would only grow by £1.25. So if you want to expand multiplier effects, you've got to find ways to reduce the withdrawals. The bigger the withdrawals, the smaller the multiplier effect would be. Right, now here's a good example of the multiplier effect process. So look at what we've got here then. We've got a new company looking to invest £200 million into producing more demand for the economy. Now, this has been done by the government spending £200 million to build affordable homes. So straight away, if we spend £200 million building extra homes, the economy's output will grow by 200 million straight away. But then that will create ripple effects across the whole economy. So, for example, there'll be lots of businesses that benefit from that £200 million. So we're going to have people that supply bricks and timber. People who sell the land will generate incomes from those houses being built. Architects will have to draw up designs for the houses that will create extra jobs and extra incomes across the economy as well. When we build these houses, we then need thousands of workers to be building the homes. That creates more wages and more profits for households. It could even come down to the fact that all these builders will demand local takeaways at dinner times for lunches, and that will create benefits for those businesses. So what the idea would be is that even though we've only injected £200 million into the economy, all of these extra spendings that then take place across the economy will create more jobs, higher incomes, which would lead to GDP growing by more than the original injection into the economy. Now you've got here a really good diagram to look at to show the multiplier effect. If we go from AD1 to AD2, that could be the benefit of that £200 extra government spending. But then the multiplier effect would be AD2 moving outwards to AD3. So AD1 to AD2 is the original injection. That's the original benefit on national income. But then the multiplier effect might see AD moving outwards even further. Right, guys, there you go then, multiplier effects. And that is the end of this video.